Sure. Yes. There you go. Okay. I wanted to transfer your face to the thing there. Okay. All righty. Well, now we are recording. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining us for our monthly Global Chamber Export Import Forum. I am the moderator, Anita Rodal, president of SBPI Services. SBPI Services represents several currency exchange companies and helps global businesses lower their rates and fluctuation risks on their cross-border payments. For US-based businesses, we also broker working capital and equipment loans. In addition, I offer private pronunciation coaching via Zoom for foreign-born business professionals who want to speak region-neutral American English. Our forum today is about 55 minutes long, and the last 5 to 10 minutes, we will open it up for Q&A and conversation. But until then, please do keep yourselves on mute. Got a couple networking tips for you first. It is a very good idea to use both your first and your last name here on Zoom. And if you are a member, please put an asterisk in front of your name. But even if it's not a Global Chamber call, always use your first and last name so people can find you afterward. It makes it much easier. And also take advantage of the chat. Put all of your contact information in there and don't forget to save the chat. There are 3 dots at the top. You can click on those. It says Save Chat. And then you can, at your leisure, go back and find everybody else who put their full contact information in there. And that's a great way to grow your LinkedIn community as well. So today we are so lucky to have the amazing Martha Medina with us. And I am going to tell you a little bit about Martha. Dr. Martha Medina is Vice President of International Sales at Tempe, Arizona's leading manufacturer and distributor of dietary supplements, 21st Century Healthcare Incorporated. She is originally from Mexico City and has a PhD and Master of Science degree in biochemistry from Arizona State University, as well as an MBA from the Instituto Tecnológico y de Estudios Superiores de Monterrey in Mexico. That's a long name. I wonder what the email address looks like. Oh my God, I hope they abbreviate it. Dr. Medina's background, okay, good. Dr. Medina's background also includes R&D and quality of consumer goods, mainly hair care, deodorant products, and dietary supplements for both humans and pets. And with regard to the supplements vertical, over the past 15 years, she has developed extensive experience in international registration, logistics, sales, and marketing. Dr. Medina has successfully registered and entered markets all over the world with a concentration in the Middle East, Eastern Europe, Asia, Africa, and Latin America. She is on the Arizona District Export Council and serves on the advisory board for the Global Chamber's Phoenix chapter. You do not want to get on her bad side because she is a black belt in Taekwondo and she's been teaching kickboxing for the last 25 years. We will be on a first name basis from this point on, so welcome, Martha.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. I always start off my interviews with 3 very quick icebreaker questions. This is like, speed dating. So in 60 seconds or less, here's the first question. Tell us how you, wait a minute, I'm sorry. I want to turn off the, I don't want messages popping up here. I do not want to show the chat. Okay. So tell us how you got into this business.
Okay. Well, when I started at 21st Century, because, that's a long road how I arrived really to even 21st. But when I started at 21st Century, I was running the QA and the QC department, and it was actually a very short stint at that. The gentleman who was running the international sales side of things left, and so we have every year we go to the international trade show in Dubai. The company does, and so he had left right before that was going to happen. So the owner of 21st said, "Okay, you're coming with me to Dubai," and so here we go. 3 months into the company, I was on my way to Dubai. And so because there was nobody else with a background in biochem, it actually worked in my favor that my background was what sort of got me into the door. And everything worked so well that I was in QA and QC for about 2 years before the switch actually happened to move over into international. But because of that background, it all kind of married together really well. And because at the same time I was getting the MBA, things just fit really well. And I ended up staying with international sales. So that's the short answer, even though it actually took a lot longer to get to that point.
That's okay. I will forgive you that one. We'll do shorter on the next one. What do you like best about what you do?
There's actually two answers to that, even though, maybe you said one thing, but two answers to that.
Okay.
One is that I do get to use my background. It's not often, I think, that, science fits into sales easily. So using my biochem degree into what I do now in international sales is actually a really cool thing because I never anticipated that I would be able to do that. I never really thought that I would be in the lab long term. I really didn't want to be, but the fact that I can still use my background is exciting to me always. So that's one. But even more exciting to me is that I love international. I love culture. I love languages. So being able to use both in this position in this career is probably my favorite thing.
That's awesome. Now, the flip side of that question is, what do you like the least about what you do?
Oh gosh, timelines actually. The timelines that for
Interesting.
this particular uh, world that I live in of
Mhm.
supplements, the
Yeah.
timelines that it takes for products to get to actual market, it takes a very long time from inception of, you get a customer and you talk products, and from the time that it takes to register a product and get it to market is really long. So it does not actually show the effort and the time that you put into something until it doesn't reflect the amount of time and effort you put into the sales until much later. So I think that is my
It's
least favorite thing. And I'll leave it at
called
that because we'll
delayed.
talk about
Yeah.
it.
No, I get it. That's called delayed gratification. So,
Very delayed. And in a world
yeah,
where we love instant gratification these days, you get a text and you want an immediate response,
you want
but
a deal.
it's crazy. But,
Yeah.
to know that you have done the work and to not get a response even for 3 years is insane. So that is my least favorite.
Yeah. Okay. Got it. Fair enough. Okay. So let's get into some of the more
Nitty
particular
gritty.
questions. All right. So in your bio, it mentions that the international markets you've developed over the years. Do you have any idea how many products 21st century healthcare actually sells into those markets?
Well, if you consider that 21st Century has about 200 SKUs, give or take, in the US. And it's so if you multiply that really, because we do custom labeling for our customers, not everything goes custom labeled to every country that we sell into. But if you consider that we do custom label quite a bit, I would say probably in the hundreds.
Nice.
We code things a little bit differently for export. So let's say our CalMag Zinc product, for example, we have one label for domestic for the US, and I am now probably on, I would say we code them by X number one, X2, X3, and I believe I'm up
Mhm.
to X11 right now. So I have CalMag Zinc times 11 now in different countries. So imagine, you can just kind of gauge that. I have 11 versions of CalMag Zinc around the world, and then
Wow.
times 200 or so. So it's
A lot.
extensive. We do have
It's
a
a lot,
lot. Yeah. Hmm.
which means you're juggling, got a lot of balls in the
Yes,
air there.
you are juggling a
Um,
lot of balls.
yeah. So what types of sales channels do you typically sell through?
Mostly, I would say brick and mortar for
Okay.
export, and I sort of briefly mentioned right now that dietary supplements, both for pet and human, and I'll probably talk mostly about human supplements. We do sell pet supplements around the world too, but we do mostly human. Um, they have to be registered around the world in most countries. And
Mhm.
that basically what that means is that while in the US they're not treated like pharma products around the world, they're almost treated like pharma products. They are regulated as pharma. And just as a real brief example, if you go to Brazil and you take a vitamin C product, vitamin C 250 milligrams can be sold over the counter, but vitamin C 500 is sold behind the counter. Vitamin C 1000 is even sold worse. It's like a prescription drug almost. You have to sell it by prescription. So you can imagine that it's difficult, right? So in that sense, brick and mortar is the way that most products tend to be sold in other countries. However, as we get more into the future, we are selling more in e-commerce through
Okay.
Amazon, through iHerb, mostly.
Oh,
There's other sites that sell in different countries, depending on the country. In Asia, there's different avenues, but mostly Amazon and IRB tend to be the ones that go into the countries. And mostly that's because it's more direct to consumer and they don't
right.
require registration. Not to be said that that makes everything easier because it actually trumps everything and all of the work that you do to register products. And they
Uh,
tend to take the domestic label from the
yeah.
US. So it actually creates quite a bit of issues for the customers that are doing brick and mortar. So.
Okay. Ooh, yeah, I can imagine that.
Mhm.
Okay. So what are some of your criteria? Like if you're doing brick or mortar, what are some of your criteria in selecting a distributor or a retailer?
The way 21st Century has approached it in the past, and this could very easily change, something that I mentioned to Anita, the company is celebrating its 35th anniversary this year. So for 35 years, essentially, it's been owned by one private owner until this year. We were just recently acquired by a private equity firm just in December. So things could change very quickly. But until now, we have very carefully selected our partners. And the way we selected them was mostly by them approaching us. That's not standard usually. We would go to trade shows and people would approach us and we would do our due diligence and talk to them. And sometimes it would take many meetings and many conversations and research on the company and conversations and visits. So you sort of talk a lot and presentations and things like that. So that's one way that we would look at it. A lot of times it was by word of mouth, where one customer would recommend the next, and then the next, and then the next. And so it kind of became a family, if you will. And then we actually established a quote unquote office in Dubai at one point in 2013, where out of our Dubai office, we handled the rest of our Middle East customers. And so we acquired some partners in that realm, and we handled the customers out of Dubai, and acquired partners that way too. But most of our partners have been with us for 15, 20 years at this point. So we'll lead into that question, I guess, in a little bit, but because of the way we have to do business with registration and things like that, we handle it through exclusivity. So in most of the countries that we service, we have one partner, one distributor, one importer, and that's pretty much how it rolls.
Okay, that makes sense. But if somebody approaches you, you're still doing the same due diligence on them as if you were going looking for somebody saying, "Oh, why don't we sell into XYZ country for whatever your reasons are?" So the due diligence is going to be the same. It's just as nice when somebody raises their hand and says,
Absolutely.
consider us.
And when we don't, I'll preface it with this because this is something actually that we're switching over into, with this change in our company. Right now, a lot of companies are approaching us and saying, "Hey, we want you to come into such and such countries that we have not done business in right now." And sometimes we'll say, "Okay, let's do business, no problem." And so a lot of people will say, "Well, yeah, let's do it." And we're not approaching exclusivity right now. We're saying, "Let's do it." Now, you can certainly do that. And a lot of people will say, well, aren't you worried? They're going to take your product. What about payment? You can always approach it like this. There's no problem with it as long as you don't hand over product without payment. And a lot of people will say, but how do you do that? Prepaid terms. Prepaid
Yeah,
terms. That's how
absolutely.
we approach our business a lot of times, where we will not ship unless we have payment in hand. And a lot of people will complain, a lot of companies will complain, but that's just the way we do things. Or at the very least, we'll say if you can't, if it's too much, then at least we will take, say, 50% prepaid in order for us to prepare to ship, process the order with 50% down payment, and then before ship, we'll take the other 50% and then we're ready to ship. So there's a lot of ways that you can work around that, especially if they're brand new customers. So we deal with things and as they come, case by case basis, as we establish people as customers.
That makes perfect sense. Okay, so the world is basically your oyster. So, what are some of the questions you have to ask yourself then when you're considering selling into a new country or market? If no one's
Well,
raised their hand, but you think it's a good idea.
mhm. One, of course, is always, do we have all the well, first, I guess, do we have documentation is one, but is there documentation needed? Are there regulations to go into that country? If there's not, then it's fairly simple to do. One of the places that tends to be that way is in the Caribbean. The Caribbean tends to be fairly easy. So if you have a partner to go, they approach you and they say, "Hey, we want to export, we want to take your products." Great. Then it's pretty simple. Off you go. If it's a country like we've just been approached, we've actually done business, significant business in Ukraine. Ukraine has become extremely difficult lately. They're adopting
Mhm.
EU regulations just this year, but because of the war, things have changed significantly on top of it all. So, with Ukraine, we were able to, at one point, we were doing business just using our own US stock, which is great. Then they've changed to, wait, no, now you've got to label the product with Ukrainian labels. Okay, we can still do that, no problem. Now it's changing into, wait, no, now you've got to do custom formulations. Okay, now it's getting a little trickier. So, can you actually do it? Sure, we can do it, but can you meet minimum volumes? Okay, so now we've got to have a different kind of conversation. So there's all sorts of steps along the way that you really have to examine. And then on top of can you meet volumes is can we provide the right documentation? Can we not only can we prepare it, but can we actually go out and get the documentation that we need? And by that I mean, do you have access to the correct channels to legalize the documents that you might need? You ask yourself, what does that mean? Do you have access to the embassies? Can you get those documents legalized properly? Do you have your Chamber of Commerce set up? Are you a member of your Chamber of Commerce to get that document legalized properly? Do you know who you need to talk to? There's all sorts of little nuances that you need. So those are all steps that you want to make sure that you know exactly what you're doing. And if you don't, do you know who to reach out to make sure that you do know
Yeah, no,
that?
that makes sense. So, in theory, though, you could be, and Ukraine's a great example. I mean, I'm sure that you're selling into the EU anyway, so
We're
you're
actually
not
not
coming.
because EU has
You're
always
not.
been extremely tricky. We're starting.
Oh,
We're
okay. I
starting.
made an
EU is
assumption.
probably EU is actually probably one of the trickiest regions, if I may, because of the regulations that they have on formulations. And the way our
Yeah.
company works is that we use our stock formulas and then it's basically white labeling, right? We take our own formulas and then we slap a different label on them and we export them. And if it doesn't fit their needs, then we have not gone on in the past, we have not gone on forward. Now we're starting to think, well, can we do custom formulations for others? But only if they meet the minimums. And that's where it
Okay, that
gets
make
tough because
okay,
minimums
that makes
can be
sense.
very high.
Yeah. And I realize now when I was reading your bio that it did not say the EU, so I don't know why I made that assumption. So, in theory, though, you could have somebody who has been a customer in the past, like Ukraine, and things could change, or any country where they didn't have regulations, now they do have regulations, and it then has to be worth your while, like with minimum, orders, um, for you to go through the work and the hassle
Right,
of incorporating and adapting to those new requirements, right?
right. Right.
Okay.
One of the things that that's actually happening right now is this Ukrainian company. They keep saying, no, 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 we'll take it. We'll take the volume. We'll take the volume, but we won't ship it all at once. Well, that becomes a problem for us, right? Because one, it's going to stay in my warehouse. So now you're talking about shelf life. Now what's going to happen is it's going to sit in my warehouse, but when I go to label it, now you're running out your expiration date. Are you going to be okay with taking product that is now from 3 year expiration date? It's going to go down to two. It's going to go down to one, and it's not going to be okay for you because you just told me that you needed product with at least 2 years of expiration date. So what are you going to do? I need you to be okay with taking at minimum, let's say 500,000 doses, which is my minimum, bulk manufacturing volume. And if you cannot do that, then I can't manufacture what you're asking me. If it's a custom formulation and I can't manufacture it for anyone else but for you, then I can't do that. I'm not going to sit on that bulk, right? Until you're ready to ship
Oh,
it.
yeah.
It's just not going to work for you or for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, and if they had been okay with the expiration date issue, they would have paid you up front for it anyway, right?
Right, right. But most people won't do that. They'll
Right.
only
And then
pay as
it's
they ship, and that's where it becomes the problem.
right. But it's also taken up real estate, and that has a price as well because you only have so much warehouse space. So that makes
Right,
sense.
right.
Okay. So, you're talking about, your partners and your customers. I guess I would focus more on partners with this question. What are some of the criteria that you look for when somebody says, we'd like to buy your product, we'd like to bring it into our country? What do they have to be able to do or be for
Mhm.
you to say, yeah, you would be an adequate partner?
hmm In the past, it used to be that they were real small, and that was okay because there weren't too many requirements. But as time has gone on, things have really changed drastically with regulations and the requirements. And so everybody that we now work with has, even if it's a small department, but they now have a regulatory person on site that can actually do the back and forth with me of the regulatory piece of things. So,
Froze there for a second.
sorry, I was saying that regulatory has to be a piece of this, right? They have to have someone on hand that can submit the regulatory piece of it. So it's not me that's actually submitting the regulatory piece of things from here all the way to their country. It used to be, for example, I'll throw in Kuwait as the perfect example. When I first took over international, they would send the regulatory request for re-registration of products. The forms would come in Arabic, and there was no translation with them. Literally, as here you go. Here's the registration requirements for the renewal of this product. And I'm looking at it, and it's not even a PDF that I could go and copy and paste into like Google Translate. It literally was a picture that you couldn't do anything with. So I'm looking at this going, and what am I supposed to do with this unless I hire a translator? I'm not going to spend that money. You guys speak Arabic, you speak English. Can you please at least send a translated document, right? So we couldn't do anything for the longest time. Well, now that's evolved now. They now have a regulatory person on site that actually sends us translated documents, and we work together and we put together documents. I asked them for translated documents, translated labels, and we work together. That's actually evolved significantly. It never used to be that way in the beginning. 16 years ago, not that way. Now it's something completely different. But you do have to look for partners that are going to work with you in that way. It's not just, here's my order, go take care of it. It can't work that way. It has to be a,
Right.
a true partnership. They have to be able to, at least for our world, it has to be somebody who's willing to import, export, and distribute. It's very difficult to have multiple partners, one that's going to be an importer, one that's going to be a distributor. It almost can't be unless it's a big enough country where you have one importer and multiple distributors, if you will. That's a different scenario. And we do have countries where that would be the case. India would be somebody like that. China might be something like that. Mexico actually is trending in that way because those countries are just so large, you cannot work with only one distributor. So you have to really put that into your head and say, is this country small enough or large enough where only one distributor can do the full job? You also have to consider, at least for our industry, do they as an importer slash distributor, are they just a distributor? Do they have pharmacy chains that they can distribute into their own locations? Or, do they have the actual capacity to push the product in the right way? So,
Right.
depending on your industry, you have to consider what is their scope? What's the big picture for them? How is this going to
Okay.
work? Or are they just small enough that it's just not going to have enough reach and you really need more than one partner?
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Um, and you touched on exclusivity earlier, and you kind of sort of answered my question, but um, you're working with one exclusive partner.
hmm
Do they ever ask you for exclusivity? Like they want to know that you're not working with somebody else?
hmm Yep, and we have
Like,
we have contracts with them. So we tend to do what we do is sales goals essentially, and we'll touch on it through a contract, and we say, okay, how about if they're brand new with us, then we'll do a 1 year exclusivity deal where we say, okay, let's try it out because we're not sure if you're going to work out, right? Especially when there's no registration involved. That works great. A 1 year contract works great when there's no registrations involved. Let's see if you're going to work out. Let's put a sales goal to it. You tell me that you're going to be able to hit, I don't know, say $50,000 in this year. Great. Let's put $50,000 on it as a goal. And if you hit it, fantastic. Let's sign a 3 year next. And then we put different goals on it for the next time. If you don't hit it, well, let's consider why not. We're not, at least in the past, we've not been super sticklers on it because we do like to consider the world situations and why didn't they hit the goals? What were the, scenarios? And so we tend to be very mindful of what's going on. Now, if registrations are involved and you're signing a contract, again, I've had the situation where one product literally took 3 years to register. And unfortunately, our registrations, depending on the country, can take 3 to 5 years. The registration life is 3 to 5 years. So, for example, I submitted the registration documents. It took 2.5 years to get the approval, and it was a 3 year life on that international registration. So, by the time that we got the approval, I had 6 months left on the international registration because they don't take it from the approval date. They
Oh
take
my
it from the
gosh.
submission date. So when
Wow,
I was
that's
receiving
crazy.
the approval, I was already submitting renewal registration documents. That right there, it was the first time we were submitting it. It drove me so crazy. We didn't even have a sale yet, and I was already renewing it. And it was like, and by then the registration requirements had already changed and my dossiers were hundreds of pages, and you're going, why? It's
Oh my
insane.
goodness. Now, does the assuming there weren't any changes, does it go quicker on the renewal?
Um, for me to prepare documents if there's no changes, yes, because I can literally print, re-sign a new date, and off I go. But that's just not
But
the case.
on their side, do they take another 2.5 years? Or once it's in the
Uh,
system, they'll
it
approve it a
can
renewal sooner?
3 to 6 months.
Well, okay, it's not great, but
And
it's
and
certainly
you're
better.
always at the mercy of the reviewer. And the reviewers, God bless their hearts, they are not necessarily scientists all the time. So in their minds, they say they know what they are reviewing. And oftentimes the questions that I am getting are, I am not joking you, they are formatting issues. Well, you need to put 60 tablets here, not here. And that literally just cost me 3 weeks.
Oh
I
my
it,
goodness.
it blows your mind the things that you have to change and it costs you time. I cannot tell you how much time has been lost on things like formatting in a document that you create. And one day I submit it the way they told me, and the next day I am changing it back to what they originally told me not to do. I mean, it is completely crazy, and it's because a different reviewer checks it every time. It's not the same reviewer every time. So
Wow.
you're at the mercy of whatever, their Ministry of Health
Yeah.
or their FDA or whoever it is that's reviewing it. That probably is added to, my least favorite things.
Okay. Duly noted.
Added.
Yeah. Okay. It goes on that list. Um, what are some of the misconceptions that people have about exporting the same products to different countries or markets? You've kind of sort of touched on some of them, but um, what do people get wrong when they're like thinking about doing this?
Um, well, that every country is going to have the same regulations, one, that every country is going to accept the same documents, that the same formula can go across borders in the exact same way. That's absolutely not true necessarily. That, for example, in the Middle East, you have the Gulf countries, that every single Gulf country is going to accept the same label. Oh my gosh, no. And they're all Gulf countries, right? So you would think that they all will accept the same regulations, the same labeling. No, absolutely not. Because Bahrain, for example, loves following Saudi Arabia rules, and Kuwait does not. Kuwait will not accept UAE regulations to save their life. They would rather Oman actually would rather accept Kuwait, but they will not take UAE. And they're in the Gulf countries, for God's sake. They're a piece of the seven, and they will not. Um, yeah, there's just so many little things that no. There's also the fact that just because just because it's a dietary supplement, you think that it's going to be treated over the counter. Nope. It is a pharma product. It's a pharma product. It's a pharma product. A joint product is treated as a pharmaceutical, and it's recommended and prescribed by a doctor. They are actually put through insurance companies. They are registered with their ministries of health, so insurance companies cover them. It's crazy. There are so many little things and nuances that we don't do in the States. There's also another big misconception that in the States, and this is actually backwards, and I say backwards because in in the international world, they will say, I need, for example, a certificate of good manufacturing practices in order to register your products. And then they will say, I need it from FDA. Well, FDA does not issue good manufacturing practices, even though they come audit you, they don't issue those documents. And so then you have to make sure that you find where am I going to get a GMP certificate from? So there's a misconception that the US does not regulate food supplements. The US has that misconception that food supplements are not regulated. That's also not true. We are regulated by FDA, just in a different way. So there's all sorts of, weird things that people don't actually understand about this industry in general. And it goes both from international and from the US. So it does lead to a lot of misunderstandings that cause issues in general.
Okay, that makes sense. So I had a couple of other questions I was going to ask you along these lines, but you've already answered some of them. So I want to change gears a bit and talk about logistic issues. So what are some of the logistics issues that need to be considered when you're exporting?
Well, I think it mainly depends on your customers and how they want to have their goods ship, right? So it's not really up to me. The only thing that's up to me is, do I need to refrigerate my products? In general, in any industry, obviously, you know your product best. So it depends on you if you need to send out your goods refrigerated or not. Do you need a dry container if you're shipping it by container? If you're shipping it by airplane, same thing applies. I used to think that, oh, well, it's going by plane, so you don't need to refrigerate because on the plane it's pretty dang cold, so you don't need to refrigerate it, right? Well, some customers need it refrigerated and they need to control the temperature within the airplane. So there's actually that piece of it too. But the key question really is, do the customers require that? Some countries require all the goods come through refrigerated. I don't know why. There's seasons, obviously, and some seasons require refrigeration, some seasons don't. They don't care. All year long needs to be refrigerated. I have a brand new customer. Apparently, they had a really bad situation at one point where their goods got stuck, even though it was in wintertime. Their goods got stuck in the container on the ship, and something happened and they got ruined. And so now every shipment they send out has to have temperature controlled. It has to have actual temperature gauges. It has to have thermal blankets. And I'm going, oh my God, this is overkill. It's overkill. You're sending it in winter. Who cares? You're spending thousands of dollars on this. That's their prerogative. That's what they want to do. That's on them. So you have to know whatever your customer needs, requires, wants. It's up to them. Um,
Let me ask
so
you real quick
depends
about
on. Yeah.
what about the opposite of that? Like, let's say it doesn't supposedly need refrigeration, but there is an upper temperature limit which could, affect the efficacy or the shelf
Hmm.
life of the ingredients. And, it could get to the port in a refrigerated truck.
Hmm.
Um, but what if it sits, on the dock before it's like loaded onto the ship and
Hmm.
it's 120 degrees out, or, just it
Hmm.
sits there long enough to raise the temperature, even if it's going to go back into a refrigerated
Yeah.
section, like how do they control for variations in things like
That's a
that, or
great
do they?
question. That's a great question, and I honestly I don't have an answer for that. Um, I believe they're required if it's being controlled, they are required to tell you that, but it's also up to you, you as a shipper and you as a receiver, you are required to clear it and to manage the clearance of it. So, you know, because I don't handle the clearance side of things. I only handle from here to there, but it's up to
Mhm.
your clearance side to make sure that you're there and ready to clear it. So if you are shipping in a container, then it's up to you to clear it quickly and receive it quickly and take it into your warehouse quickly. When it
Okay,
doesn't,
that
I
makes
believe
sense.
they do put it directly into a warehouse. They're supposed to anyway, and it is supposed to go into a warehouse quickly, and that's where you're supposed to pick it up.
Okay, okay, that makes sense. And what else? What other things are, logistic
Um, well, there's also,
problems?
how are you going to build your pallets? Obviously, if you already know if it's going by air or by sea, there's dimensions to consider. By air dimensions, depending on if you're going on a freighter versus on a regular plane. There's height dimensions. There's also small plane dimensions that you have to consider. I've often had to break down my pallets because I thought they were going to go
Oh,
on one plane, and then we went and got a quote, and it turned out that plane was not available, so we had to break down the pallets to smaller dimensions or to loose pieces. That's also all parts of the equation that you have to consider. And thankfully, that was all before they left my warehouse. So we had to do it. It didn't happen when the goods had already left because that could also be an extra cost, obviously. So those are just pieces of, the equation. And then there's also HTS codes to consider. Do you
the
know what the
harmonized,
HTS
what do they
codes
call
are for your
harmonized tariff
goods?
schedules? Yeah.
Yeah. And that piece of it, that's a crapshoot, I've decided. I was listening to one of your other import-export forums, and I learned I did not know that it's every 5 years that the chapters get reviewed, but then I also learned that the numbers underneath can change at any time. What I did know is that each country can sneak in their extra 4 digits anytime they want. That part I knew because I can submit the number that I think it is, and then the country that it's shipping to can reject it and tell me, nope, that doesn't work. And you go, well, that's what I'm shipping, and I've looked it up, and that's what it is. And they can tell me that doesn't work for us. Bahrain can have one number, and Kuwait can have another one, and US has a different one. And it's like,
Wait,
I don't know what to tell
That
you. You know?
that does not sound harmonized to me.
No, it's not harmonized in the least bit, it
Like,
feels like to
not in my
me.
music world.
Yeah,
Wow.
exactly. So for me personally, I usually go with the one that fits the bill the most, and that's the multivitamins and multi-minerals. That usually fits everything under one umbrella and seems to work for us fairly well because that's what we ship mostly, a combination of
Yeah.
multis and multis. So great. So
Okay,
I mean,
awesome.
it gets too tricky after that. So
Yeah. That makes sense.
yeah.
So anything else on that? Because then I have a couple more questions.
Documentation, of course. Make sure you have your proper documents at all times. You'll require commercial invoice, packing list, a certificate of origin. Some customers require certificates of analysis. Others require certificates of health. Know how to get them, where to get them, if you can get them, that kind of thing. So.
Okay. I want to sneak in a question that doesn't have that much to do with this directly, but when you mentioned when you first started with 21st Century, you were both in quality control and quality assurance. What's the difference between those two?
So QA is directly on the floor measuring the physical properties of our supplements, like hardness and thickness and disintegration of the tablets and the capsules, and the soft gels. And then QC is actually the chemical properties of the tablets, so the active ingredients. They're in the lab, they're measuring the vitamin C, the vitamin D, the actual content, the active ingredients, making sure that the potency of the tablets and the capsules are what they say are on the label claim.
Okay.
The
Okay, thanks.
micro
That
micro
just
making sure the mineral, the microbial analysis, all of that piece of it. So they're slightly different. Still under quality, but slightly different.
okay. Now but there's a distinction now. I get it.
Yes.
So I'm like, that
Mhm.
sounds redundant to me, but there must be a reason. Okay. I was going to ask you something else about lead times, but we kind of talked about that within the documentation stuff or the registration stuff. So I want to get to the thing that I'm like most interested about. You said you have some really interesting stories. You told me about four. Yeah, you mentioned for Japan Pet Trade Show, Dubai Health Trade Show. being in meetings where people speak different languages and then traveling to Arab countries as a woman, which I've gone through that with my niece who worked in the Middle East for a while. So tell me some of your fun stories because I think everybody wants to hear these.
Okay. I think maybe one of my favorite on the pet side, I went to Interpets is a trade show in Japan, and I don't know if anybody's ever been to Japan. Um, in general, Japan is probably one of my favorite countries ever in the world. I absolutely love Japan, but I had never been there for pets, for anything pet related. So I had my stand, I went by myself, and I had one of these pop-up stands, and I set up, and I was the only US stand there, and I got set up in front of China. And so here I am. I speak a little bit of Japanese, not a whole lot, but just enough to kind of, get words here and there. I set up, and all of a sudden the show opens, and I'm like flabbergasted. Japanese people and their pets. If you think, I don't know, I think sometimes US people and their pets are kind of, out there. But if you think we're out there, Japanese people and their pets, holy cow. I saw a goat in a kimono. I saw an owl on a shoulder on in a kimono. I saw a cat dressed as Snow White. Let's see, what else did I see? I saw a dog in 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 like spurs as a motorcycle rider with like
Goodness.
goggles on a roller suitcase riding around the trade show. I mean, I cannot explain to you like a parakeet. They were all dressed up and they were all taking pictures with everybody. It was the wildest thing ever. I can't explain it. Japanese people and their pets is insane, but so cool. They really take care of them. They absolutely love their pets. And I thought we were going to be a big hit. I thought we were for sure going to start exporting there. We were going to be in there. And their regulations are so dang hard. And we have not been able to get there. And
Oh
I'm
no.
so sad because I want to go back so badly.
Oh my
But
goodness. Okay, I'm trying to visualize parakeet. I had a parakeet once. Like, how do you dress up a parakeet? Like, I
I,
get the
no,
dogs, the
I'm
cats.
telling you, they did everything that you can imagine. They did. They had the mini poodles dress up. They had everything that you can, every pet that was there was dressed up in some sort of way. And I'm gonna have to go back and dig up my pictures, and I'll have to send them to you. And if you want, you can
Please.
send them out to the group because I'm telling you,
That's
they were
hilarious.
absolutely insane, some of them. But I think the goat and the kimono might have to be my favorite, maybe. I don't know.
That's like who would have thought? Um,
Yeah.
kimono, like how that's great. Okay, we may not have time for all of them because I want to open it up to questions in about 4 minutes. But how about the Dubai Health Trade Show?
Well, the Dubai Health Trade Show and the speaking Arabic with customers is kind of one and together. We go every year, and that's where I see all of my customers. I actually don't travel very much for being an international trade as salesperson. I actually don't travel very much. I do maybe one or two trips a year, and that's because I see all of my customers at the Dubai Trade Show every year. They all travel there,
Mhm.
so it makes it one and done. But it's a huge, huge show. You cannot walk it in 4 days. And so the first time I went was that first time that I went, I was not international sales yet. But the line for the taxis was insane. It was like 3 hours long. And so, I mean, this show is huge, right? So, one of the times that I was there was with my Yemeni customer. And I'm sitting there and I have my guy that, the Dubai office that I mentioned that we opened, he's sitting in front of me and the guy doesn't speak very much English. The Yemeni guy doesn't. He speaks very little here and there. And so he's sitting in front of me and my Dubai guy is there. And so they're having the conversation about all the deals that we're doing. And so the two of them are talking and I'm listening. And because of Spanish, you can catch a lot of Arab words. And so they're talking back and forth, and I'm just intently listening, and I'm just sitting there like this. And at one point, I can catch the conversation, I can catch the context. And I looked at him and I go, no. And he turns like this and he goes, what? And I said, no. You understood what we said? And I said, yes. And the answer is no. And I don't remember what the context was. And he said, really? No? I said, no, we're not doing that. And he was absolutely flabbergasted that I understood the context. And I said, no, we're not doing, whatever it is we're doing, we're not doing it. And he was like, "Oh my God, she understands Arabic." And he was just shocked. And that is my thing. Never ever judge whether a person can understand or anything. It's happened to me before. I speak French. They fully thought that I didn't, and I just sat there, It is one of my absolute favorite things to do. You bust out
Right.
what if you speak another language,
Yes.
you bust it out
Yes.
in the middle of a conversation, and then they're like this, and they go,
There you
"Oh
go.
God,
Oh.
she caught us. She caught us." It's one of my favorite things, I think. So,
It is fun. And I have to tell you, it's not just with spoken languages. My sister signs. She taught deaf ed for years. And her and her
exactly.
friend who also taught deaf ed, they were in a bar and they're like, oh my God, that guy over there is really cute. And he comes over and says, thank you. Turns out he signs too.
That's
So
awesome. That's
lots
great.
of languages. Okay. And then what about like being in meetings where you have multiple languages? It sounds like some of the lunches I used to go to in Venezuela when I lived there, like
Yeah.
one person speaks French and English, one speaks French and Spanish, one speaks English and French, and somehow or other we had a really good time. Was it like
Yeah.
that?
Yep, it really is. And I thrive in situations like that. I don't know. I think I was born for this. I come from a multilingual family. I have aunts that live in Switzerland and El Salvador and I mean all over the world. And this is my jam. I feel like this is what I was born to be around. So it's exciting for me. So I love it. I love it.
That's awesome. I agree. I have family all over the world, and it's a joy.
It
It's
is.
just so much fun.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to open it up for comments, questions, conversation. Oh, alliteration. Haha. Um, you can unmute yourselves. If you have a question, Alt Y will get your hand up because I don't know. I can switch to gallery view. But if you have any questions or comments, raise your virtual or your real hand if you like. And if your video isn't on, I won't know that you're there. So, anybody have any questions or comments? Elizabeth, what are you looking at there? Oh yeah, there's your
I'm
hand.
trying to find how to raise my hand. I don't set my it's not
I saw it.
working.
I saw
It's
it.
oh, you did? No, you this
Well, your
hand, but
physical
not the
hand.
yes, yes.
Yes.
I was just going to share, you mentioned the logistics. One thing to keep in mind, and you probably already know this, it's really important to work with the freight forwarder that
Mhm.
has expertise working, especially when you have, it has to be temperature controlled and whatnot. And
Yeah,
that said, even under the best of circumstances, things go wrong, especially with
yeah,
all the natural disasters and whatnot. So it's also important to make sure that there's cargo insurance.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
that of course, all your documentation, all that support will be required in the event of a claim. And I do
Absolutely.
have, the only claim I've ever had was in the Persian Gulf. Took us 11 and a half months to get it paid. It was with a small company. And it's because I had proof in the
Yeah,
documentation. And it
yeah,
was a freight forwarder mistake. That's the other thing. Don't assume that that's why you want to work with a good freight forwarder.
right. Exactly. And good
Do you work with more
documentation.
than one freight forwarder, Martha, or you have
I
depends
have
on regions?
Well, it depends. It partly depends on whether my customers arrange their own freight, but I
Mhm.
personally have one that I've, trusted over the years and he knows
Mhm.
my business, he knows my customers by now. So we work with one for the sea shipments and then we work with another back and forth with air shipments mostly. But so I can work with several depending on the customers, but I particularly work with one who knows our situation fairly well.
Have you have you ever had a situation where you're using your customer's freight forwarder and they're creating issues that
Oh
wouldn't
gosh.
have happened
Oh,
if you used your freight forwarder?
yes.
Reminds me of my closing on a
They
property.
just, they get really picky and they just, you're just sitting there, gosh, we could have made this so much easier if we had just done it ourselves or, they
Mhm.
don't. necessarily know that they can do things easier, or they're new at it or whatever it is. And it's just like, man, even my own forwarder sometimes is so complicated. I could do it easier than he could. We're honestly, we're encountering a situation right now where we have a shipment going to Sudan. We like to ship to the most complicated places, by the way.
Like,
Um,
with that,
we
right?
have business everywhere. We really do. And
Sure.
Sudan just initiated a brand new form that everybody has to fill out. But in order to do that, you have to fill out the form first, and it has to go, the
Mhm.
number has to go on the bill of lading. But in order to, you have to know all of the draft information. I mean, it's crazy. And it actually says that your forwarder can fill it out, but my forwarder is saying that the shipper has to fill it out, but I need all of the documentation from the forwarder in order to fill it out. It is like the most backward circle in the world. And to top it off, my container got stopped and it's being inspected by US Customs. So it's like, yay, throw another wrench at it.
Oh boy.
And then Customs forgot about it, so they put it in the backlog line. And so then they wouldn't release it, but they wouldn't tell us why they wouldn't release it. And it's because of this stupid document. So now finally we got the draft done, and then they finally released I mean, literally, it's like the most evil circle in the world. So they finally released it. We finally got the document, but then because they rolled the booking, then my document won't get issued because I have the wrong booking information because it got rolled. I'm telling you, like, headaches.
Ah, my God, you
The
need to
world
work
of
out
logis
afterwards.
the world of logistics on top of it all. So,
That's why you
Crazy.
always need to be proactive.
yes, yes. So I never
Absolutely.
anticipated that I would also do the logistics side of this. So I've learned a heck of a lot knowing
You know
from
what? It's
to
like
the
the equivalent of brain surgery for moving things around. I have the utmost respect for that. I had a friend who asked me to ship an RV that he bought from some sale here in the US to Spain, and I learned more than I never wanted to know.
exactly.
Like,
Yeah, you
it's
do.
insane. So ask me anything about shipping RVs to another country. Um, yeah. And then switching planes and things like that. That's like even when you travel, you may leave on your transatlantic flight on a big jet, and then your connecting flight might be a smaller aircraft that won't allow the same carry-on size. Oh my God, right?
Yeah,
Anyways,
exactly.
okay. So we're kind of where we need to finish up. So I want to thank everybody for joining us, and thank you, Martha. This was amazing, and so much fun. And
Thank
if
you
you
for having
enjoyed
me.
today's discussion, I hope y'all will join us next month, which is actually April 23rd. It's always the fourth Thursday of the month, same time. In the meantime, make sure you check the events calendar on the Global Chamber website. There's always something going on. If you can't sleep here, they're doing something in London, you know, at the same time. So feel free to do that. Don't forget to save the chat where
Mhm.
hopefully everybody put their um, contact information. And we will see you all next month. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Bye.
all. Thanks
Thank
again for
you.
having me.
Thank you, Dr. Medina.
You are so welcome. Thanks. Take
Great
care.
Take
job,
care.
Martha.
Thanks, Eduardo.
Ciao,
Bye.
ciao.